Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. As you may be aware, Black Armory has been released this week, and it's been experiencing a mixed reception regardless of the fact that we haven't seen all of the content yet from this release. People are just now remembering that the annual pass apparently costs money, and for those who knew and were ready, many are seemingly outraged that it wasn't in the format that they were familiar with, despite the endless explanations from Bungie to expect something different with this annual pass. So what exactly is going on? Are people justified in their outrage? And at the end of it, is there a way to objectively look at the annual pass and see if it's actually really worth it? Well, we're gonna have that conversation, so let's get into it. So before we jump into the meat of the discussion here, we need to get one thing out of the way. There's a notion out there that all of the DLCs should be free to make up for a lackluster year one, because all of this stuff should have been in the game in the first place. That Bungie owes us cash, which is essentially what people are saying, to be honest, to make up for year one. Regardless of the situation, this is literally asking the developers to continue to work for free, to stop making money, and to stop supporting their families. I'm with you. It sucks that Destiny 2 didn't live up to our expectations. It sucks that you feel like you didn't get your money's worth in year one, but asking for free updates to make up for it just isn't realistic. There is over 1,000 people working at Bungie, not to mention those working at the other studios to help support the annual pass content. It's a tired conversation to have, but it looks like we're gonna have it anyways. Destiny isn't your typical game. You can't compare it to a game like Witcher that has quote-unquote free DLC. The DLC for The Witcher was carefully planned and budgeted for. The same goes for any DLC that adds an expansion to the story in a sort of more one-and-done fashion. You have a limited amount of DLC to get through and you're done. Destiny is quite a bit different. It's a live game. There's no end to the work. The developers are working year-round to pump out more content. Now, as far as the quality of the content, that I want to dive into now, but I wanted to get that part out of the way because for the purposes of this video, you kind of have to be okay with the reality of paid DLC. Do I wish that paid DLC didn't exist? Yes. Do I wish Destiny cost less and took fewer resources to develop? Of course. But that simply isn't the reality, and newsflash, Destiny 3 probably won't be too different in that regard. Does it split up the community to those who bought the DLC against those who didn't? Sure. Is it a hard sell after so many DLC failures? Absolutely. But it doesn't take away from the fact that they need to continue their stream of revenue to sustain the business of developing the Destiny franchise. So of course this video is inspired by the mixed reception of Black Armory, the first content release of the Forsaken Annual Pass. Just to be clear, to become content complete, if you're starting from scratch, you need a base copy of Destiny 2, which is free or super cheap. You need Forsaken, normally $40, but I think you can get it for $30 nowadays. And finally, you need the Forsaken Annual Pass, which if you need to purchase it separately, is another $35. Why was this okay in the first place? Well, Bungie was so confident in Forsaken that they treated it like a normal full game. Whether or not you agree with that assessment is, well, up to you. But regardless, that was the hand we were dealt. They were very bold in making that decision and trusting that enough people would see the quality inside of Forsaken to want to expand that experience further. So the annual pass is what we're talking about here. So as far back as the reveal of Forsaken over the summer, we knew that the annual pass was going to be different than the expansion pass of last year. Bungie specifically stated that the annual pass is designed to add content to the endgame experience. It's continuing the grind, moving the carrot on a stick further back, and injecting new gear and activities to help keep things fresh. And to their credit, that's exactly what Bungie delivered. Now, from what I've seen online as far as reactions, which is not the majority of the case as some news outlets are very quick to mention, people's complaints fit into two distinct categories. The first category is those who are simply disappointed that they didn't have things to do on day one. And by that I mean that the new activity, the Lost Forges, start at a power requirement of 610 and scale up to 630, meaning that unless you are a super skilled player or are very well coordinated with your team, you may not be in a position to play this content for a couple weeks. That's also applying to the raid, which is set to the recommended power of 640, just 10 under the power cap, but no one seems to have an issue with that. And therein lies the answer. Even though Bungie has stated it literally every chance they get, some people can't wrap their head around the fact that the annual pass is intended to extend the endgame. We're just used to completing launch content and moving on to DLC, expecting a full launch experience with new campaigns, new missions, new strikes, a slew of new activities. But this isn't going to be that, and in their experience 4 times now, people don't tend to have the best reaction to that, so they've moved on to the annual pass model. Essentially, think of Forsaken as a base layer with the seasonal content on top of that, and then you have that very thin but very rich icing of the annual pass content that is going to add that extra layer on the very top. That's how you really have to think about this. You still have Forsaken and the seasonal stuff underneath it that don't cost you anything extra. Now, it is partially Bungie's fault for not really explaining the Lost Forges at all, really, before they were released. In a twist of events, Bungie forewent the usual livestream reveal and opted for a polished and prepared Vidoc. Had they hosted a live stream, they might have had more of an opportunity to talk more about the Forges and set people's expectations up the right way. They also could have admittedly introduced the Forges a little bit better as well. The Haunted Forest method could have been perfect. Have a scripted quest where you have to seek the Forges out and do one that is at a lower power requirement. You would get to complete it, maybe even get one of those new randomly rolled weapons just to get a taste of what the Forge has to offer. Now, to their credit, Bungie has received the feedback pretty well and is already deploying a fix. Luckily, they were able to tinker on the server side on their end and reduce the power requirement by 5 for the activity. Of course, if they wanted to do any more than that, then they would have had to deploy a patch, which can take at least a week for them to develop and deploy for it to go through certification and then finally hit your console. But hopefully, the slight reduction in power requirement will make it a little bit more approachable. Honestly, I'm not too crazy about reducing the power level. I love activities that are difficult and challenging. I want to bust my ass and complete them because they force me to become a better player. They force me to use strategy and tactics to make up for the power delta. We just escaped year 1, which was essentially only for casuals. Let's not retread that territory. Now, my only critique is that maybe it should have scaled a little bit differently in difficulty. Maybe make it go from 605 to 610 and 615 for the final round, and then maybe have a hard mode for special weapons, the ones that are maybe powerful, and those could be from 615 to 630. The power scaling seems a little steep for a 10-minute activity, so that's the only real thing I would adjust. Now, moving on, the second category of negativity has to do with the actual content itself, or how they might put it, the lack thereof. And even those people have some credibility, but nothing that I would consider a surprise really. These content releases could always use more gear in them, and it's a constant point of feedback that it will continue to make until it's addressed. We need more Crucible gear, we need more Vanguard gear, we need more Gambit gear. All that stuff should be refreshed every season, and it currently isn't. A lot of us are starting to find the weapons that we are going to be sticking with for the rest of the year, and that's not very good. Also, it's difficult for Bungie to show us all of their cards because the surprise is really half the fun. That's what made the discovery of the Shattered Throne or the Whisper quest so amazing. They can't tell us exactly everything that is coming in Black Armory because that would spoil the surprise. My only hope is that we all move past this topic pretty quickly, hopefully in time for Penumbra, because people might be really upset considering how mysterious and secretive Penumbra is bound to be. There's a lot of weight now in Joker's Wild to feel worth it, especially since that edition won't be bringing a new raid. The new Gambit experience they're working on better be out of this world. Now, as far as content, well, you get everything you see here. There are 3 forges, a raid, whatever Nairobi Labs is, and there is the exotic quest for the last word. You can plainly see here that Black Armory isn't designed to be a massive content drop, but rather, it is simply kicking off a 3-month season's worth of content that is going to be released over time. Now, they've made great strides to make those without the annual pass not feel left out. You get the power increase that everybody else does, you get new gear, you get all the events like next week's Dawning. None of that requires the annual pass. In fact, Forsaken is not yet actually fully complete. Without spoiling anything, there has been certain leaks to suggest that more story content is still coming in Forsaken related to the original stories that we got. And you can bet that it will not require ownership of the annual pass. That is pretty stellar. Unfortunately, Bungie can't tell us that because it's going to be a surprise. So this is sort of the double-edged sword that they've been dealt, and that's really their uphill battle. So after all of that, the question still remains, should you get the annual pass? Do you need the annual pass? Are you missing out if you don't get the annual pass? Well, it's $30 to $35 depending on how you acquire it, and Black Armory is about a third of that, so $10 to $12 worth of what you're paying, and the value add here is the forges, the new exotics, and the raid. For me, it's mostly in the raid, and that's because I raid a lot. And Scourge of the Past looks like it's going to be really fun. In fact, for me, the raid alone is worth a $10 price tag for Black Armory. I'd pay even $20 for a raid, which sounds crazy, but that's how much return I personally get from raids. But of course, you don't have to be a raider. One of the best parts of Forsaken is how solo-friendly it is, and once you're at the right power level, matchmaking into forges will be more than okay to get all of your forge grinding done. So really, you gotta ask yourself, how much do I care about new gear and the raid? Do you even have the base Forsaken content completed yet? Are there seasonal quests you still have to complete, like the ones for Breakneck, the Mountaintop? Those are gonna occupy a lot of time. Are you amongst the many who are still trying to master the Last Wish? If the answer is yes, then maybe you don't really need it quite yet. You will continue to get the seasonal updates and the holiday events as well. You will have to suffer through your friends bragging about their god roll forge weapons, but that's really a small price to pay. Bungie has given us the tools to make informed decisions. If you have questions, ask them down below. I'd be happy to answer. But please, don't be like those people on Twitter and on YouTube. Don't be a keyboard warrior and spew half-baked thoughts. Is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. Bungie still has a lot of kinks to iron out before they get this really right, but in due time, hopefully things will finally settle down a bit. Also remember that it's very likely based on reputable leaks that we were expecting a second annual pass in fall of 2019 to keep Forsaken fresh for a second year until D3 is released in fall of 2020. Maybe I'll make a separate video talking more about that later on. But for now, I hope this video helps make sense of things a little bit better. But let me know how you feel about everything in the comments below. I'd love to continue the conversation. If you enjoyed the video, a positive rating is much appreciated. Be sure to subscribe for our continued gaming content, including these Destiny updates every single Friday. Thanks for watching, happy gaming, and I will see you all next time.